I am Stefan, and we're going to talk passwords. So passwords, are they enough? Not by themselves. That's a short answer. You're going to need a second factor, especially nowadays. There are more and more companies being hacked and being taken advantage of, and more information being exposed to unknown people, hackers, even governments, possibly. So you want to have some way of changing or protecting yourself in the event that these other companies get hacked or information gets exposed. So yeah, in a nutshell, passwords are not enough, not by themselves. Now, there have been several recent examples. Um, for instance, recently Geico had been hacked and driver's license information has been released. The hackers are now using this information to um, file for unemployment and receive the unemployment money in people's names. We have other uh, examples here where um, people's accounts have been taken over. For instance, First Horizon Bank, um, they've been hacked, and people's account numbers are now being um, exposed to unknown people. We have a contact tracing app in Pennsylvania, which uh, released the personal health information of 72,000 people, which can then be used in other ways, can be used for social engineering, taking over people's stuff, getting other people's money, getting other people's benefits. You don't want to just rely only on a password. You need to have a second factor. So I'm going to go over this real quick, just about why passwords are not enough. I know I've given you a couple of examples, and they hadn't spoken specifically to passwords. But Facebook had another breach be released to the general public. It's not like on a news site or what have you, but this usually hackers that get this information sell it to other hackers, people who want to use it to take advantage. And in this case, we have 500 million Facebook accounts that have been exposed. That's passwords, and these people's passwords now have to be changed. And unless you have some way of checking it, for instance, have I been pawned? I'll put the link of that in the description. If you look up have I been pawned, you can look and see what breach, at least to the knowledge of law enforcement and other places, that your information has been exposed in. So now let's go into why passwords aren't enough further. First of all, they can be figured out. Companies that have been breached, like Facebook, the hackers, what they're doing is that they're getting a copy of the encrypted password information. It's called a hash. Okay, so the encrypted copy of your password is being acquired by these hackers, and what they're doing is, when you try to log into Facebook, and if you try too many times, it'll go take you through the process of resetting your password, or if you try too many times to log into your Google account, that it'll lock out your Google account. Well, what happens is when they have a copy of that information, they don't have that limitation. They can keep retrying passwords as much as possible. And in fact, it's not a human doing it, it's a computer that's incrementally going through and trying to figure out what these passwords are. So that's one. Number two is that a lot of people reuse their passwords, and hackers understand that. And what they do is, once they figure out that password, not only they get into that account of that original company that was hacked, they're going to try that password in different places as well. So for instance, if you're using your Gmail and a particular password to log into Facebook, what happens is, once they figure out that password, they're going to try to use that password in Google to take over your Google account. I don't think you want that kind of problem. Now, the use of two-factor the second factor that I was making reference to before. What happens is when you have two factor, it um, gives you a heads up that you've been hacked. You know, if you're using text, for instance, which is the lowest form of two factor, so you know, and companies like banks and stuff need to step up their game when it comes to that, because that stuff can be taken over. Your phone number can be taken over, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But um, yeah, so when you have text as a two factor, when someone figures out your password, then you get that text message with the um, the number to go ahead and get into your account, and you didn't just try to log in, then you know somebody figured out your password. Change it right then. Um, Also, if that hacker or hackers know your phone number, for instance, if they pulled it from an app or they bought it, what happens is then they might call you for that information. Don't give it to them, and I would say mark that number as spam. You know, report it to the spam shield application from your company, or what have you, your carrier. Also, if they know that phone number, they can go ahead and try to take over that account by using social engineering. They can call your carrier, or if they figure out who the carrier is, they'll call your carrier and then they'll try to change the SIM card associated with your phone number. And that's what I was alluding to before um, in terms of the text two factor being the lowest form. Now, with two factor, you also get to keep control over your account. By the way, I'll talk about different forms of two factor in a second. But you can keep control of your account, because if you have two factor authentication enabled and there was a breach that you didn't know about and the password worked for the hacker, then they still can't get in because they don't have that second factor. Um, but you still want to change your password as soon as you find out that your password has been exposed. You don't want to just rely on that second factor like that. That's You're putting too much on that. No. Um, which then in turn makes you a harder target to hack. So if a hacker can take over an account and get money from using that person's identity by password only, then they're going to do that. But if they're not able to, they'll either move on to someone who's easier to take over, or they're going to take more invasive measures to try to get into your account. For instance, calling you for that two factor number or SIM swapping. Now, becoming a harder target. First of all, enable two factor authentication. In some cases, the company forces you to do the text one first. But if they have other options, use those. For instance, if you can use an authenticator app, do that instead of using text. Because what happens is, it doesn't matter if someone took over your phone number, which it does kind of matter. Your phone numbers are tied to a lot of things. But when it comes to getting into that account, they won't be able to use your phone number to do it. Um, so there's that. There's also a hardware two factor authentication, which is kind of going to get into something a little bit deeper, but more convenient. Because I know that you guys don't like to change your passwords. I know that you guys like to use the same password everywhere. But when you have, we're going to talk about the whole password thing and convenience in a minute. But becoming a harder target, if you have a physical two factor authentication, then it doesn't matter about the shared secret. If some see what happens is, your phone number is one shared secret between the company that is you have the account with and yourself, in order to verify the second factor. The other shared secret is, it's a encryption. Let me put it this way: it's like a formula. It's like an algorithm, right? What happens is, a piece of software, and the company that you're using the that you have the account with, is using a like an algorithm to generate these random numbers. So then when you go to log into something new, it's gonna be based on the time and where and when you did the login attempt. The company and the software is going to synchronize that number, and it's going to show you this number, and you only have a certain number of seconds to go ahead and type that number in as a second factor. And if you type in the correct number, you can get into the account. If you don't have the right number, you can't get into the account. That's the other shared secret. But hardware to second factor authentication, what that does is it keeps the private key. So it uses public key encryption. Yeah, I know I'm talking a little over your head with that, but what it is you have a number that is secret to you. That's your secret key. Then you have another number that is public. So what happens is that public key or that public number is then stored onto the company's databases. And what happens is when you're using that second factor, the company uses the number that they have to generate a piece of information that only you can decode because you have that private number that you can use to decode it. And once the problem, the algorithm is decoded, then you've confirmed that you're the owner of that account and you can log in. What that does is it takes the access to your account from a central server that keeps getting hacked to uncentralized, and it's in a little piece of hardware that you carry with you. So that is even more secure. Now, in terms of becoming more convenient, there's some talk about passwordless authentication. So you won't need to use a password, which is convenient to you. You don't have to keep it. You don't have to change it. You won't need a password keeper. You won't have to remember it. You won't have to make anything unique because this is going to become unique in its own. Whereas you're using two-factor, but you're using it in a way that is not kept on any central server, just like the hardware key that I was talking about. Well, that would probably be the way. But then also, that code is only generated with the company that you have that account with. When you're using an account on a different company website, then what happens is a different code is created, and it's not something that you have to remember. It stays the private number that is used to decode the code that's saved onto the new account can only be decrypted or can only be figured out by your private key and none other. If you go to a website, there's a lot of phishing going on, fake websites that are being put up, and people's passwords are being exposed in that way because they're tricking you into thinking that you're dealing with some legitimate company when it's not. You don't have to watch out for that. Well, I would still say watch out for it, but what happens is when you try to use your key, it's not going to work because it's the code that's on that impersonating website is not syncing up with your key, and it's not going to get any it's not going to get a valid response. So stuff can't be stolen from you that way either. So saying all this to say, passwords right now are becoming more of a burden to people than what we have available to us. Now, there's not a whole lot of adoption with the passwordless system. That's the only problem with that. Right now, it's kind of in its infancy in terms of adoption. But this has been, for instance, the FIDO campaign, or I don't know what really to call it, but it's an alliance of companies that have that they basically established fast identification over the internet. So that's what FIDO is. FIDO is fast ID over the internet. So but it's being adopted slowly but surely. And what that does, it takes the power of verifying your account away from the company and in your hands, and it makes it harder to breach, because even if the company gets hacked, all they have is public keys. They can send you an encrypted email, but they won't be able to take anything from you because you have the secret. You have the private key. So passwords are not enough, not by themselves. And maybe they'll be eliminated altogether. So we have that to look forward to. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave me a response. I will put in a link to the Have I Been Pawned website. I'll also leave a link to the FIDO Alliance so you can go ahead and learn about that if you're interested. And I have one last thing I wanted to bring up. Um, would you be interested in a phone that has already been degoogled? So a lot of the Google tracking is removed from the phone, or the phone is using a whole different OS. Now, I've made some reviews of a couple of the OSs before, and they're a little less convenient, but you have a lot more control over the privacy. So, would you rather buy a phone, figure out first of all, figure out which phone you need to buy, then buy the phone, and then go in and go do all the technical stuff that you'll need to do to reset that phone into a privacy operating system? Or would you rather buy one that's already done? So leave me a comment about that one. And that's it. I will be talking to you soon. Until then, stay safe and mind your password. Later.